Hare Krishna, dear devotees. My name is Krishna Prana Devi Dasi, and I'm here today to talk to you about the window of tolerance. And this is an emotional regulation model, a nervous system model to understand the experience of how traumatic events impact our ability to cope, as well as understanding how our survival responses are really supportive to us during threatening moments. And this is all in relation to understanding why women tend to respond in the way they do to threats such as intimate partner violence or assault. So to start off, this area in the middle of the page here, where it says optimal, this is actually the window of tolerance zone. So this is the area where we can feel our emotions, we don't feel overwhelmed by them, we don't feel shut down by them. It doesn't mean we're always happy in this optimal zone. It just means that our emotions are at a level where we can feel our feelings and still feel relatively in control of our experience. And this is where I have social interest in mind. I'm actually going to care about my loved ones. And this is where I'm able to take in information most easily. If I went to a class and I'm in my window of tolerance or in my optimal zone, I'm going to learn a lot in that class. So keep that in mind. And when we're here, what's called the ventral vagal system gets activated. That's not so important, but for those of you who are interested in the technical language, that's the ventral vagal system. Then on top of this window of tolerance, we have this area called hyperarousal. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the high activation survival responses like fight, flight, and freeze. These are probably the most talked about survival responses. And when we go through a threatening event, like let's say a woman is being assaulted, if she has the ability to use some of those responses, she would. She might fight, or she might try to run away, or she might freeze in that kind of anxious place in that moment if that's most adaptive for her. And we can understand that when we're up here in this hyperarousal place, the logical brain actually shuts off, which is really good news when we're in a situation of threat. Because if I take too long thinking, oh, what am I going to do in this threatening situation, then I might lose my chance to act. And when I'm in a threatening situation like that, I need to respond quickly. If I'm going to run, I need to run right now. And so I can be grateful to my amygdala, which gets activated up there. This is the brain structure that senses fear and activates our survival responses. And again, no real logic happening up there. And so in this type of scenario, a woman being assaulted, it's really great news if one of these high activation survival responses are able to help her get out of that horrible situation, such as an assault, right? That's awesome if that's an option. However, in the majority of assault cases, that's not going to be an option. There are barriers such as the man being bigger, being stronger, having a more intimidating presence, right? All of these are things that might get in the way of the woman being able to successfully use a high activation survival response, right? Like if he has a weapon even, right? She could end up getting more hurt or harmed if she were to try fight, flight, or freeze. So instead, what she might do, and again, this isn't conscious thought, this is the nervous system running the show. She might drop down to here, to this hypo arousal place. And this is also a survival place, although it's a less obvious one. And when she's here, this is where she might feel numb, collapsed, dissociated, not really present. And this is a supportive survival response when none of these hyperarousal responses are going to work for her. Down here in hypoarousal, she's still in this horrible situation, right? But at least when she's down here, she doesn't have to feel the pain, the fear, the overwhelm associated with being in that horrible situation. So it helps her get through it. And this is actually the reason that women often don't fight back or don't run away when they're being assaulted or having violence inflicted upon them, because there's this knowing in their nervous system that it's just not safe to do so, and that the safest thing that they could probably do in that moment is to shut down, dissociate, drop down into this hypoarousal place, or we also call it the dorsal vagal system, and that just helps them to get through it and survive and to not have to feel all of the scary, devastating, overwhelming emotions that go with experiencing something like an assault. So it's really important to understand this, because we never want to be in this stance of believing that women consent to an assault or consent to violence just because they didn't fight or just because they didn't run away, right? We know that these hyperarousal responses like fight, flight, and freeze are not accessible, are often not safe for women to engage in those moments. So rather than staying up here in hyperarousal, or another word for it is the sympathetic nervous system being activated up there, we drop down to here into hypo, and this is what keeps women surviving. And it also keeps women stuck at times when it comes to staying in abusive relationships, because if we're going through a situation of ongoing threat, right, chronic abuse, it's natural that my nervous system is going to be bouncing from hyper to hypo, going back and forth between sympathetic and dorsal vagal. But then as a result, my window of tolerance is getting really small. Maybe I'm spending a lot of time down here in hypoarousal because I'm feeling powerless. And even though that is keeping me safe to some extent by not having to feel all of those overwhelming emotions, it may also be keeping me stuck and making it really hard to leave if I'm feeling that consistent experience of powerlessness, even though I'm not powerless, right? Just like up here, logical brain shuts off, down here, the logical brain shuts off as well. So all of this to say, we want to be compassionate and understanding when it comes to women staying in abusive situations, when it comes to women responding to violence or assault, because it's not her choosing what she's doing in those moments. It's these survival places in the nervous system doing whatever they can to make sure she's as safe and the children sometimes are as safe as possible. So we want to be grateful for that. We want to be understanding and we want to be compassionate. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for listening. Hare Krishna.